But I have to leave early for a
Yeah, sure.
business webinar.
You have to open up the shul.
No, that's not a problem today. Today I have a business webinar. But I'm going to stay as long with you as long as I can.
Thank you so much. We're beginning the laws of Tzitzis. And the question is, if you have the Tzurba Mirabanan, which I think David sent out, then I think the first page that you may have, if you could help me out with that, is maybe page, 1 second, could be page 36. Does that make sense? You have page 36?
Yes, I have 36. It's in the email he sent. It's 36 all the way up to, let's see, we got 48.
All right. Don't get that
51, up to 51.
On page 36, he quotes the Psukim in Parshas B'Shalach, in Parshas Shlach. And this is the parsha that we read twice a day in Kriyat Shema, third parsha of Kriyat Shema. Now, if you take a look in the Sefer Chinuch, he tries to find the shoresh for the mitzvah of tzitzis, a root, and he says, "Nizkar is called mitzvah Hashem Tamid." That's explicit in the pasuk. Utzchak is called mitzvah Hashem. And there's nothing in the world that's more important than reminding ourselves constantly of the mitzvah Hashem. But he goes beyond that, and the Sefer Chinuch claims that every master has a chosem, some sort of stamp, and that stamp is attached to a garment of the Eved. So we are avodim of Hashem. We're not avodim of Paro, as we have in these parshas, but rather we're free to serve Hashem, and we switch the Abdus to Paro from Mitzrayim over to Hashem, and now we become Abdi Hashem, and the Chosem that we wear on Abogadim are the Tzitzis. The Tzitzis on the 4 knofos are a remembrance of the Tag Mitzvahs and our Shibud, our Abdus Takot. Okay then? So we'll just, I'll try to fix up something here if I can. No, I don't know how to do that. Okay. So now we have a source for the mitzvah, a little bit of an understanding of the mitzvah, and we compare this parsha to a parsha in Kitese, in Dvarim, Gedilim, Tasalecha, Al Arba, Kanfos, Ksuscha, Asher Tchaser Ba. So now we have 2 words that describe the beged. We have in the parsha in Shlach, it says Al Kanfe Vigdehem. So the word is beged. And here, I'm going to try again because there's so much. Oh. Okay, that's a little bit better. Now, in the case of Parshas Kiseitze, it doesn't say beged, but rather it says ksus. Chaf samach vav taf. That's ksus. Now, the big question here is going to be, what exactly comprises a beged? What materials make up a beged and a ksus to generate a chiyuv of tzitzis? So if we take a look at the Gemara Masechta Menachos Daf Lamed Tes Amud Beis, which hopefully you'll find on the bottom of your page 37, the Gemara says that there's something special about 2 particular materials, and they are tzemer and pishtan. So, for example, if you have a beged that's made of tzemer, your tzitzis could be made of pishtan, and vice versa. So whatever beged you have, whether it's tzemer or pishtan, the chutei tzitzis, which would be now from the opposite, not from tzemer but from pishtan or vice versa, would patter up the tzitzis. Now the question is, what about other materials other than Semru Pishtan? So what we have here in this issue, I think we touched on it last week, I'm not sure, is a machlokes in the Gemara. And the machlokes revolves around shar minim, other materials other than semer upishtan. Now, what this is going to mean is that certain materials are questionable as to whether or not they generate a chiyuv tzitzis, and we're talking about on a doraisa level. Chazal say great things about tzitzis, and therefore, as we discussed last week, we want to take every opportunity to fulfill the mitzvah of tzitzis. Not only that, but if we have an opportunity to fulfill the mitzvah of tzitzis doraisa, which according to everybody would apply to tzemer or pishtan. So if I have tzitzis that, like my talis gadol, my talis katan, that's made of tzemer, then I surely, by putting on tzitzis, fulfill the mitzvah doraisa of tzitzis. But what about other materials? And if I have a beged of other materials, and we have in the Gemara a case called Meshi. Perhaps you remember we discussed Meshi last time, and that is silk, a garment made of silk. And then we have Ar, Ayin Vav Resh, a garment that's made of leather, sort of, meaning hides that were subject to tanning. And here we have the following shittos. If you take a look at the Gemara itself, we can summarize the Gemara in the following way: that Rav Nachman is of the opinion that begadim for tzitzis is semer or pishtan, and he quotes a Tana Debei Rabbi Shmuel to support that position. However, although there is such a Tana Debei Rabbi Shmuel that says Hol v'nemar begadim stam, the Torah didn't mention what kind of material makes up a beged. However, Pireit L'cha HaKasuv Bi Echad Mehem, in one particular case, the Torah specified Semer Upishtan, and Parat L'cha Rashi says, you'll see this on page 38, about 6 lines down from the top of the Rashi's, Kalayim. The Torah says in Kalayim, what is a beged? It's Semer or beged pishtan, and he combined the two and sewed them together. He violates Kalayim. So the Torah is clearly, explicitly classified Semer and pishtan as beged. But the Tana Debei Rabbi Shmuel is quoted by Abaye in a totally different way. Beged, ein li ela beged semer. Minayin l'rabos semer gmalim, semer arnovim, notza shel izim, v'aklach, v'asirkin, v'ashirayim. Minolon, Talmud lomar o beged. So in the context of this particular formulation of Tana Debei Rabbi Shmuel quoted by Abaye, as opposed to Rav Nachman, we have a special ribui, o beged, to be marbe many different types of materials. For example, wool that comes from other animals, not just from sheep, and even feathers that come from goats, and you can weave them together and make a garment. And your chayiv and tzitzis according to Abaye and the Tana Debei Rabbi Shmuel quoted by Abaye. So we have here in sum a machlokes on the most fundamental question about tzitzis between Rav Nachman and Abaye. According to Rav Nachman, ksus is a beged that's made of either tzamar or pishtan, period. Any other material is not included in the definition of the Torah of beged. Abaye, on the other hand, based on his version of Rabbi Shmuel, has an expanded definition of tzitzis, in which case many other materials are considered beged, and therefore they're chayiv in tzitzis. How do we paskin? Now, keep in mind that Rava is also quoted in the sugya. And the Rosh is going to paskin like Rava. So what is the shita of Rava? And where does he fit into this whole picture? Is he willing to expand the definition of beged and the chiyuv tzitzis beyond semer upishtan? Or does he limit it to beged upishtan? And although Rav Nachman in the Gemara says that only semer upishtan are the only two materials that on a doraisa level qualify for beged in tzitzis, the Rosh points out that we're not going to paskin like Rav Nachman, but rather we're going to paskin like Rava, because Rava is called a Basra. He's a little bit later than Rav Nachman, a later generation. And Rava is the one who paskins that you can expand the definition of beged for tzitzis to include the other categories that we enumerated here, and they are also a beged and chayav in tzitzis. Despite the Rosh, and the Rosh also quotes from Ein Tam to support him, we have on the other end of the spectrum the Rambam and the Rif. The Rambam and the Rif both paskin like Rav Nachman, and that means that on a total level, the only chiyuv of tzitzis applies to these two materials that you made the beged from. They, semer and pishtan, qualify as beged. Nothing else qualifies as beged. Therefore, the Rambam writes in Perek Gimel Milchus Tzitzis, Talis shel shar minim kigon bigdei meshi, bigdei tzemer gefen, that's what we call cotton, bigdei tzemer gemalim, they sheared off from the camels and they were able to make begadim out of that, or tzemer novim, they took the outside of I'll call it the wool, if you don't mind, the wool of the rabbits, and even the feathers of goats, and none of those are chayiv in tzitzis midoraisa, because we accept the sheet of Rav Nachman, only semer and pishtan. However, the Rambam clearly indicates that all these other begadim made out of semer gefen, semer gmalim, semer novim, notzah shalizim, they're all chayiv midivrei sofrim. Mirabanan, they're chayiv in tzitzis. So in truth, it would seem that this machlokas here is purely theoretical, because whether you accept Rava that all begadim are chayiv doraisa, or you accept Rav Nachman that, with the exception of tzemer upishtim, all other begadim are derabanan, at the end of the day, you're chayiv in tzitzis. And even under the Rabbana, we make a bracha. The Shulchan Aruch, following the line of the Rambam and the Rif, paskins that ein chayov b'tzitzis min haTorah el beged pishtin o semer rechelim. It's got to be wool from a sheep. Aval b'nei sharminim ein chayov b'tzitzis ela midrabana. And the Ramah, following the opinion of the Rosh, sorry, let me get that straight. The Ramah again, let's go over it one more time. The Rif, the Rambam, and the Shulchan Aruch paskin like Rav Nachman. And what about the Rosh? The Rosh is going to paskin like Rava, who's a Basra, that you chayiv in Tzitzis Doraisa in all three cases. Oh. So now the question is, excuse me, what should we do halacha l'maisa? And as I asked you before, isn't this machlokas purely theoretical? Because anyway you slice the cake, we're going to be chayav in tzitzis, whether it's Doraisa or Rabbanan. So the Mishnah Brura mentions three differences. And this you'll see on page 39. Difference number one is, do you want to fulfill a mitzvah Doraisa? And whether or not you could do so with other materials other than baking a fish tons will depend whether you paskin like Rava or like Rav Nachman. Secondly, what happens if you have a tarovis, right? There are certain tzitzis, chutei tzitzis that are psulim. They weren't done lishma, meaning the weaving wasn't done lishma, and they got mixed up with other chutim. So you're left with a suffix as to whether or not these chutim are actually chutei tzitzis, meaning are they royal tzitzis? Because the question is, if there was no tefillah lishma, it's possible tzitzis. So you have a suffix. So what you do in the case of a suffix? Says the Mishnah Brura, if you're dealing with semer upishton, then there's no question that you have to go suffix to raisa l'chumra. But if you're dealing with any of the other minim that we mentioned, the various kinds of semer that are not rechelim, or for example, gemalim, and we spoke about notzah shaliz, in all those cases, if those are only d'Rabbanan, then you could apply the laws of suffix, and we can go l'kula. He has a third nafkamina. Let's say nifsak hatzitzis. He's standing in a public area and he realizes that his tzitzis were cut off, and now he's wearing a puzzle pair of tzitzis. Does he have to strip? Does he have to take it off immediately? And it depends. We have a principle that with regard to a doraisa is ein chachma ve'ein tmuna keneged Hashem. He's got to strip. But in regard to a d'Rabbanan, we have a principle called kavod abrios doche mitzvah d'Rabbanan. So these are various nafkaminas which the Mishnah Brura quotes brilliantly to demonstrate that it's very important to know how we paskin in this thing. And there are more paskins that, and it's unquestionable that all begadim, whatever they're made out of, are chayav b'tzitzis midoraisa, which would mean that in all cases, no matter what the beged is made of, we have to be machmir because it's a chiyuv doraisa. Okay, now the question is, what do we do l'maisa? L'maisa, we're going to paskin that we should try as much as we can to wear tzitzis that are certainly chayav doraisa, without a shadow of a doubt. L'kuli amalo pligi. And that's going to be a beged of tzemer. But here, we have a problem. When I say here, I mean here in Eretz Yisrael. You could have this problem in Toronto as well, but only during the month of July. No, I'm just kidding. But what I mean is to say it's a hot day, and you're going to sweat if you wear a beged shel tzemer. Like, for example, when I buy a talis, I spend a lot more money. They have these talesim that are made from wool that's very, very thin. And again, it's hardly noticeable, but supposedly you don't sweat as much as you would in a regular talis of wool. I'm not going to argue about it. I'm not here to get any commission, so it's you choose whatever kind of talis you want. Now, what would you guess if I asked you to close your eyes, so to speak? What do you think the Chazon Ish would tell you? should you wear a beged shel tzemer and avoid the issue of wearing another kind of material like cotton, which is much lighter, and you wouldn't have to sweat that much?
Yes.
I'm not sure what yes means because I don't remember which was no and which was yes. So.
Yes, yeah, Chazon Ish, you would think the Chazon Ish would say to wear a beged tzemer.
Correct. And in fact, that's how the Mishnah Berurah says it. He strongly encourages us, and many other poskim will encourage us to make sure that we wear a beged shel tzemer. But guess what? The Chazon Ish is opposed to it. During a hot summer day, he says that we should not wear even a talis katan that's made of tzemer, or maybe for sure a talis katan made of tzemer. And he says the following. He says that it's very nice to be machmir, like the Mishnah Berurah wants to be machmir, and try to be yotzei doraisa. But he's saying, you're getting yourself into trouble because a beged has to be a gram hana. You have to get benefit from the beged. And if you don't get benefit from the beged, then he says you're not yotzei the mitzvah of tzitzis, even to Rabbanan. And therefore, in the name of the Chazon Ish, and this you'll see on the top of page 40, he writes that I'm not going to wear, says the Chazon Ish, I'm not going to wear a talis katan made of tzemer. By the way, if anybody could help me with this, my father-in-law used to call it by a different name, a talis katan, a lobster decal. I don't even know what the word means, but I heard from him 1,000 times. Anyway. So
what is the word? A lobster?
Lobster decal. I'm probably not pronouncing it right, but Bobby, he wasn't Hungarian, but he was from Galicia. So, they had also their own pronunciation. Anyway, he says, Chamli talis shel tzemer. It's very hot for me, says the Chazon Ish. And therefore, the Gabai, for me, ein lezeh shem beged. Could you imagine? The Chazon Ish is saying that by wearing a beged shel tzemer for the purpose of fulfilling a mitzvah doraisa, I might be undermining the entire mitzvah. And why? Because ein lezeh shem beged. Pillei plun. So anybody who walks out of Bnei Brak and says, well, you want a chumrah, go to the Chazon Ish. It's not necessarily true. I remember I was in this poll when I wrote an article or two on Yichud, and the biggest makel in Yichud is the Chazon Ish. And also on Yayin, by the way. Here they, if the waiter picks up the Yayin, then they break the thing in his hand. But the Chazon Ish says that even if you're not from, there's no Iser of Sam Yenom because it's Mishum Chasnus, and there's no Iser Chasnus. Anyway, so I don't think we could always sign on the dotted line that the Chazon Ish comes out l'chumrah. And it was the Chazon Ish who said that there's no orla in strawberries. Hence, we eat strawberries.
What would the Chazon Ish say about Shtreimelech in Eretz Yisrael?
In terms of what, Kilayim? Is the problem Kilayim?
Well, it's not a beged. You shouldn't be able to wear it on Shabbos if you're
no.
roasting.
Shabbos, you don't need a shaved beged. For example, a beged shel or a beged shel cotton, all that is okay on Shabbos. It's only as far as tzitzis where there's a hekesh to Kilayim, and Kilayim is only determined fishtin. That's where we have a new shem beged that's unique to tzitzis. It's not the universal shem beged. As far as Bush on Shabbos is concerned, anything that covers your body and it's not worn as a masa is fine. No chumras for that.
But didn't you say that according to Chazon Ish, if you wear tzemer in a hot climate, it's not even a beged?
Right. Again, it's not a beged as far as the halacha of tzitzis. Tzitzis requires al beged sheyesh bo levishas hana, like Kilayim, where you're only chayav. Like, for example, you remember the Gemara about the mochrei ksus. They used to pile up, one beged on top of the other to transport it. And the Gemara says that there's no Isur Kilayim because he's not nene from it. He doesn't get hanos beged levish. So that's how look in Kilayim, and by virtue of a hekesh in tzitzis. So just to summarize what we're saying so far, and then we have to talk about synthetic garments, is Rav Nachman in the Gemara says that only Tzemer of Pishtan is Chayav min Torah. All other materials are only Chayav Dirabanan. And we have many Cholkim who disagree with Rav Nachman, including Rav Yehuda and including Abaye and including Rava. And the Rif and the Rambam paskin like Rav Nachman. Rashi, Rabbeinu Tam and the Rosh paskin like Rava because he's a Basra, who, like Abaye, holds that all materials are Chayav and Tzitzis. The Shulchan Aruch paskins like the Rif and the Rambam, and therefore you should be wearing Tzemer Upishtin, and that's exactly what the Mishnah Berurah advocates, except for the Chazon Ish, who says on a hot day you should avoid it. The Ramah, following Rashi, Rabbeinu Tam and the Rosh, the Chachmei Ashkenaz, paskins that all begadim are Chayav min Torah. Now it's fascinating that Rav Yosef advocates wearing a beged shel tzemer, even though he's a Sfaradi. Imagine the Rif, the Rambam, the Shulchan Aruch, they all paskin that you don't need a beged shel tzemer, but Rav Avadia takes a strong position that you should wear a beged shel tzemer.
So is there actually a difference in halacha between Ashkenazim and Sephardim?
Well, for sure.
The Ramah seems to paskin.
Right, for the Ramah paskin, like the Ashkenazim, says that every kind of beged is chayiv. It's not just limited to Tzemer Upishton. And we had the three nafkaminas of the Mishnah Berurah. Let's go over them one more time. The three nafkaminas are, number one, I forgot what page it's on for a second. Just let me. Page 39. We're not giving out Malchus here, but 39. And he says, number one, nafkamina will be as to whether or not you yotze doraisa. Okay, that's more of a theoretical nafkamina. Number two, if you have a taroves of tzitzis ksherim with tzitzis psulim, and that creates a suffix, then with the Ramah's perspective, you can be making as long as it's not a beged shel tzemer upishton, etc., etc. And finally, whether or not Kavod Abrios is doche, if he finds out while he's in public area that his beged is, his tzitzis are posted. And we're going to be activating for the Rabbanon, if we all like the Shita of the Chachmei Sfarad, that we can be doche the prohibition of wearing a beged of Dalet Kamos without tzitzis based on Kavod Abrios if it's made of another material other than Tzemer Upishton. Okay, without further ado, we get to our main issue, and that is big they are, right? A beged that's made out of hides or leather, if you will, and synthetic garments. And this you'll see on page 40. And it starts with the Levush. Very funny, Levush. Levush lived about 5 centuries ago. Rav Mordechai Yaffa, he was a contemporary of the Shulchan Aruch. In fact, he wrote his own Shulchan Aruch, but the Beis Yosef beat him to it. And the Levush writes that clearly beged only applies to a davar ha-arug, ayin, reish, yud, gimel, or reish, vav, gimel. In other words, here we're going to apply the principle of a beged made of ar is not called a beged because it's a skin, an animal skin, and it doesn't lend itself to weaving. And we need tviyah. We need something that's tviyah. However, it becomes a little more complicated. The Levush wants to know what happens in the following scenario. You have a beged that's made of ar. However, on the 4 corners of the beged, you attach to the beged semer or fishnet. Or let's take the opposite case. You have a beged that's made of semer, and then you attach to the 4 corners ar. 4 corners made of ar. Says the Levush, everything depends upon the ikar beged. if the main beged itself is made of tzemer, it doesn't bother me if the knuffles are made of or. But if the main beged is made of or, and the knuffles are made of what? Of tzemer, you're potter from the mitzvah of tzitzis, because the ikar of the beged is potter from tzitzis. Clearly, or is not chayav in tzitzis, and again, to reiterate, the reason for that is because it doesn't lend itself to what? To tviyah. Now, as far as the source for or being potter from tzitzis, that's a Gemara in Menachos on Daf Mem Amid Beis. I don't see it here on the page right now, so you'll tell me if you find it. But the Gemara says, Amar Rava, he shall beged uknafeshel or chayeves, he shall or uknafeshel beged p'tur my taima, ikar berg be'inon. And that's the shita of Rava in the Gemara Menachos. Clearly, the Levush has accepted, embraced the shita of Rava. The Gemara quotes another Bar Pluta, and it means that the chiyuv of a beged, even if it applies to other kinds of material above and beyond Semer Upishtin, like the Ramah, based on the Rush and Rabbeinu Tam and so forth, nevertheless, those materials have to be something other than or. Or is potter. And that's the language of the Levush. Ein chayav b'tzitzis al dover nikra beged b'tziv yosel semer al kanfei b'gdeichem ubeged udover hanera bariga lafuke or eno nikra beged. The eno chayav b'tzitzis. It doesn't have the quality of nerag. It's not a nerag, and therefore it's excluded. And now we get to the gigantic machlokas regarding synthetic garments like nylon and rayon and so forth and so on. Now I'm going to skip for a moment. You'll see on the bottom of page 40, going on to page 41, you have the Har Tzvi from Rav Tzvi Pesachran, the Rabbi Rosh Yishman. I want to skip for a moment to the Tshuva Rav Moshe Feinstein, and I'll tell you why. I think that Rav Moshe, with regard to synthetic garments, is asking the question. Again, he doesn't need my accolades and my agreement, but I always look to see if I can cut through the chase and focus on the main issue. The main issue here is whether the Torah is excluding or as a separate exclusion, a separate halacha in or is it possible that or represents a category that goes way beyond or, and any similarity to or would make it pot? So again, I don't know if I hit home with anybody here, but as you see me apply it with synthetic garments, I think you'll understand the chakir. Rav Moshe plays a very interesting pedagogic game over here. He sort of like fools us. It's almost as if he seduces us to one side, to one understanding, coming to a conclusion, and then he smashes it. So initially he says the following, that the p'tur of tzitzis is dafka or. And I'll prove it to you, because we paskin like Rabbeinu Tam and like the Rosh and the Ramah, that it's not, the chiyuv tzitzis doraisa is not limited to semer pishin, applies to all begotten. And yet the Gemara says that or is potter. Says Rav Moshe, it means that there's something unique and special about or. Says Rav Moshe, if that be the case, then synthetic garments, I'm on page 41, are not considered or. Why? He says, Yesh l'chalek tzas mibigdei or. A beged of or, in its natural state, is sholem. Or sholem. At stage 2, we manufacture a garment out of or. And what we do is we create strips and strings from the or, and then we weave those strings together to create a beged or. Not so, he says, in the case of nylon and rayon and other synthetic garments. Shemitchila nasu chutim. In other words, or does not have to be made into chutim. You can manufacture something out of or in its original natural state, just flatten it and tan it, and it has no ariga whatsoever. It is not broken down and manufactured as chutim, such that we could do ariga. Not so in the case of nylon, etc., etc. Shemitchilu nasu lechutim. There was never a flat kind of long piece of nylon, but rather we started from the get-go by producing strings and chutim, and then we wove them together. So there is an ariga here. You could say that R was excluded because mitchila, from its get-go, from its natural state, it didn't have chutim. But in the cases of various synthetic garments, originally it was made of chutim. And therefore the very inception of these materials is for the purpose of making chutim. That's what we do, we produce chutim. So Rav Moshe has really convinced us that there's a separate tour here in R, and R is unique because R is not made for chutim. In the natural universe, the R is one flat piece. It's not stringy. It doesn't have thin, long strings, and therefore R was excluded. But anything that's made l'chatchila for the purpose of ariga, when you manufacture it from the get-go into strings for the purpose of ariga, that's not like R. And I'll be honest with you. As Chatoini Masker, when I got to this point of Rav Moshe, I decided I'm going to start wearing synthetic begadim. I was so absolutely seduced by his logic and the distinction here between R as a separate category and synthetic garments that, how do you say, it was onus of mafuta, But then he says, lo nira klal. After completely bamboozling me, lo nira klal. He says the following. We're not excluding R. We're excluding anything that's very, very different than severu pishtan. Ki R, nemar bo ptur. Why? The name is shemadelo domi lo R lo niftar. Are you going to tell me that's a separate ptur in R, and if anything that's not similar to R, like the manufactured synthetic garments, are not part of the chayiv? No. There's no exclusion of R. Nowhere does the Torah exclude R. The Torah says beged. R is excluded because it's lo dami lebeged. Anything that's lo dami lebeged is not chayiv in tzitzis. R is only one example of something that's lo dami lebeged. So it's not that we have to take R as the category of ptur and start analyzing everything in the light of R and seeing whether it's similar to R or it's not similar to R. And if I can make distinction, then in Mela I'm chayav in tzitzis, even the synthetic garments, because it's not similar to R. No, that's not what's going on, said Rav Moshe. The Torah never excluded R. The Torah said that this is a beged, semer, pishton, and a couple of other garments made of different materials, according to Rabbeinu Tam, etc. That's called a beged. R is one example of something that's not similar to a beged. And synthetic garments, because they're manufactured synthetically and they don't exist in the natural universe, you won't find nylon in Sheishi Simei Abrasius. Therefore, it's not similar to beged. Because beged requires something in nature, something that's natural. Let it be from Rechelim, let it be from a gamal, let it be from our neves, let it be even feathers of a goat, and whatever it is, it's similar to a beged because it's made of a natural substance, but something that's manufactured and it's totally synthetic. It's made of, a neft and plastic, and he goes through the details about how they manufacture these synthetic garments. You could probably Google that. That's not similar to beged. So Moshe's final conclusion is that synthetic garments are not chayav in tzitzis. Not here, not there, nowhere. And if we turn back the clock, we go to Rav Frank, and in Shudhar Tzvi, he says, no. Again, he is not aware of Rav Moshe's tshuva. He's before Rav Moshe, not by much. And he says the following, you know what? There are types of nylon that are chayav in tzitzis. There are other types of nylon that are not chayav in tzitzis. And it all depends on the following question. Yesh min nylon ha'osli kulo chaticha achas. You can produce nylon out of one set strip, one set piece. V'lo michutim, the ein bo maisa oreh. And the Levush says if it's not a nerag, it doesn't have a shem beged inyan tzitzis. However, there's another type of nylon, ha'asui michute nylon, which was exactly what Rav Moshe was talking about. Right? It was produced from the get-go for purpose of ariga in strips. Who maisa oreh, v'talas mi min zeh vaday shu nichlal bichlal beged v'chay b'tzitzis. And Rav Moshe would say, absolutely not, because it's not similar to beged. It's not similar to tzemer or pishton or any type of tzemer whatsoever. It's manufactured out of substances other than natural substances. It's totally synthetic, literally synthetic. And the Tzitz Eliezer, Rabbi Eliezer Waldenberg, takes the opposite approach. And he says that big day nylon are chayav in tzitzis. Is that good news for the Jews or bad news? Is it a kula or a chumrah? It's a kula if you want to be yotze the mitzvah tzitzis d'oraisa with nylon, then you can rely on the Tzitz Eliezer. However, it's a chumrah because if you wear a beged of nylon and it's got 4 corners and you don't have tzitzis on it, then you are being mevatel a mitzvah saseh d'oraisa. So he's saying you're chayav in tzitzis. And he goes ahead and he writes, Ein lilbosh arba kanfos mehem, no nylon garments that are 4-cornered, mibli sheyatavem tzitzis. And in the world view, the halachic perspective of Tzitz Eliezer, nylon is like all the other materials other than Semer Upishta. And if all the other materials are chayav in tzitzis because we paskin like the Ashkenazim, like the Ramah, then nylon is also chayav in tzitzis. He gets a little nervous when it comes to the bracha. and he says, you know what? Don't make the bracha. Safek brachas lahak. Now, when I learned to the yeshiva here, and by the way, a lot of my classmates were Torontonians at that time, called Beis HaTalmud. I was 19 years old. We had a mashgiach by the name of Rabbi Yamin Zilber. Of course, nobody knew his last name was Zilber because we called him Rabbi Yamin Atzadik. And Rabbi Yamin Zilber has a tshuva sefer called Oz Nidbru, and he goes one step further beyond Rabbi Elazar Veldenberg, and he says you should make a bracha on a beged shel nylon. He is totally convinced, without a shadow of a doubt, that there's no difference between a beged shel nylon and all the other begadim which there are more paskins you make a bracha on, even though they're not several bishtan, and therefore you make a bracha on that. So you've got here in front of you an amazing machlokas that covers the entire spectrum. You've got Rav Moshe Feinstein who says that no beged of nylon is chayav in tzitzis. It's not a natural substance. It's not all similar to tzemer upishtan, like the other kinds of tzemer that we mentioned, that you're not chayav in tzitzis. On the other extreme, we have Rabbi Yochanan Atzadik, who's going to tell you that all synthetic garments require tzitzis with a bracha. In the middle, you have two shittos. You have Rav Tzvi Pesach Frank, who agrees that some categories, some types of synthetic garments are chayav in tzitzis and others are not. And it all depends upon the manufacturing process. And the Tzitz Eliezer says, we're going to have to wear tzitzis on synthetic garments, but don't make a bracha. So that, my friends, is the best I could do here as a summary of this entire chapter here. How many pages was that we just covered? I don't know, about 10 pages.
Does Rav Binyamin say that it's actually deraisa?
Absolutely. He sees no difference, and again, he's passing like the Ramah, between the Chiyuv Doraisa and all begadim made of any material and synthetic garments.
Because it's woven?
No, not necessarily because it's woven. I think he's maintaining that it's a beged. Anything is defined as a beged. Once we break loose from tzemer upishtan, we're not bound and straitjacketed by that halacha because we're not paskening like Rav Nachman, but rather we're paskening like Rava. Then what basically you're saying is that anything that is a beged, I wear it as a beged, like Bobby was talking about on Shabbos and Rosh Hashanah. It covers my body, and I want to wear it. I want to get benefit from it.
Yeah, but we don't say that with regards to leather. So how do you even though you use that?
Okay, Joe, I'll get back to your question. I just wanted to, I'm sorry, I take a look at the bottom of 41, where he quotes from Binyamin Silver, and you see there's an aleph and a beis there on the bottom of page 41. Yes, maybe?
No.
No, you don't see that. Now I'm beginning to think I may have a different edition from you.
There's
David,
a number 6.
If David's here, I'm going to need your help, David. In your edition, do you have on the bottom of page 41 a little aleph and a little beis?
It's at the bottom of 37.
Really? Oh, no. So you mean I've been quoting pages to you left, right, and center, and you don't have the same text?
Right.
Because I checked this out with David.
Let me explain something. There's internal page numbers from Yitzhak Fatma, and then there's the page numbers that were printed in the book itself. So you got to get one or the other. Both of them, they don't stand.
But something wrong with my internet connection, so I can't hear you. I mean, I heard something, but it was
What he's saying, Ruzon, is that the Yitzhak Chachma has its own numbers, which are not the same as the numbers of the Sefer itself.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. And the numbers of the Sefer itself don't appear on any of your pages? Wow.
They don't, but the documents are numbered according to the page numbers in the Sefer. Your Chachma numbers are in the book itself, it's a different story, but I went with page numbers that are printed.
So I just want to show you, this is what my sefer looks like.
Yeah.
And if there's, again, I'm just saying, if we can get David a copy of that, I'm sure that all the bookstores would have it, or they can order it. Last time we tried to order Yoni Aloka Chelik Dalet, it took about half a year. But maybe we'll get better service or luckier if we order this. Otherwise, I'm gonna have to, I guess, maybe print out the pages that you sent in the email in order that we should all be on the same page. But in any event, you're telling me, Joe, that on the bottom of your page 37, you have that Aleph and Beis?
Yes.
Okay, so 1 minute. Let me try to see this.
It's the same thing. So go ahead. Just tell us what you want to say.
Yeah, no, I this is important for me, Joe, because I got to know where I'm standing over here. Just give me a minute. I lost my place now. Where am I? I was on page what? What did I say was on? On page 41, right? So whatever you call it, 37, you said? So just tell me if you have the following. Yitsuyon, this is about 5 lines up from the bottom of the page. Ki Arab bin Yom Yeshua Zilba. You have that. Oh, so
Yes.
take a look at Aleph. Ein makar mefurash b'gemara lekach shebeged shel tzitzis tzarich lios arug. Now this is amazing. We've been building mountains and castles in the sky based on the Levush, which is on the previous page. Again, it's my page 40, and I've been announcing page 40 over and over again, but it's probably your page 36 or whatever it is. There's a Levush. And the Levush says that a beged for tzitzis has to be a davar ha-nera. That was 5 centuries ago. And now, Rabbi Yoman HaTzadik, who I knew personally, he's not alive anymore, but I knew him personally, he's telling you that nowhere does the halacha require aruv. Again, you can have, Joe's question about R, we'll get to in a minute, but do you see what he's saying over here? Ein makar b'gemara etc. lekach shebeged shel tzitzis tzarich lios aruv. So he says the following, and here's where he answers your question, Joe. So what is the definition of beged, and why do we exclude R? He says, "Hagdara shel beged le'inyan chiyuv tzitzis hi kol shederech lasos me'em beged." What do you do with this material? Do you make a beged out of it or not? So again, I can't tell you what we do with R. I can tell you that I once was zocha to own a wallet that was made of R. I even owned a pair of shoes that were made of R. And my wife tells me that she has a lot of different things that are made of leather, a whole bunch. They're expensive, but you can make something out of leather. Now, there are garments that are made out of leather, but Rabbi Yoman is saying that they're rare and far between. That's not your average use of leather. What do you do with leather? You do with leather X, Y, and Z, but you don't usually use leather for what? For a beged. However, included under kol shederech lasos me'em beged is badim synthetium, polyester, and so forth and so on. Ma'aser b'chol yom she'osim me'em badim. We make begadim out of polyester. It's synthetic, but we make begadim out of it. Anything that's osli lasos bo begadim, or we use it in many different ways. So that's what I wanted to tell you. Now, what would be your equivalent to my page 44, which is called Mispar HaKnafot? 38? Would that be page 38?
40.
Page 40. Okay. And we start with the Gemara Menachos Daf Mem Gimel.
And here it shows the page from the actual Sefer 44.
From the actual Sefer, it's on 44. And in
Right.
your copy,
So,
it's on page 40?
Well, in this case, it has both. It shows the page in Tzurba Chachma 40, and it shows the page in the book of 44.
That's very important for me to know. You hear this, David?
It depends whether the page is captured all the way to the bottom exactly.
Ah, I
In
see.
other words,
You
in
mean
other words,
sometimes,
the
like
next-
Otzar
the next-
is taking pictures of the pages. Sometimes they take a picture of the entire page and you
Right.
get the number of the original book, and sometimes you don't.
Like, so for example, the next page, which would be your 45, which is our 41, it does not have the page on the bottom. Like that doesn't have the page
Ah.
45.
And you'll have page 41 on it, but page 44, you have the 44 on the bottom.
Yes.
Aha. Interesting. You see, I'll tell you the honest truth. I didn't bother, taking a look at David's, attachment to the email. I didn't do that homework. And the reason I didn't do that homework is not only because I'm lazy, that's the main reason, but the reason I didn't do so is because David and I had a Chelufe Mechtavim in which he took a picture of, I don't remember what page it was in Hilchos Tefillin, and I had the identical page in my book. So I named on as a Dor Pashut that we're always going to be using the same page numbers. Okay. Anyway,
You kind of are, like, if you look
I'm gonna
at,
need Bobby. I need your help here. Go ahead, David.
you
David,
look,
David, your sound is muffled. I don't know what's wrong with your sound.
I don't know. Anyway, if you look at the document names.
Bobby, were you able to catch that?
No, I can't. He's
Oh.
muffled. I can't catch it.
All right,
So-
David. We'll have to reconvene in order to understand what you're saying. It's either a problem in your microphone or you have COVID. One of the two.
Or not.
But all right.
Try again.
Anyway, we don't have much time, so let's just go through the Gemara Menachos on Daf Mem Gimel and Beis on page 44. Look at it. It says in the Bryce Al Arba Knafos Ksuscha Arba V'lo Sholosh. Atomer Arba V'lo Sholosh O Eino Ela Arba V'lo Chamesh. So Gemara goes back and forth. Could it be that the Arba is excluding 5? Could it be excluding 3, but 5 is enough? Shu Omer Shetechasaba Hare Balas Chamesh Amur Mani Mekayim Al Arba. I would have understood Asher Techasaba, anything that covers your body, let it have 5, let it have 100 different corners, that should be included. But the Torah says Arba. And when the Torah says Arba, it's coming to tell you that it's got to be Arba, not Shalosh. Nothing less than 4 will do. Okay, what about a 5-cornered garment? So Gemara says that I have a ribui for a 5-cornered garment. So the pasuk Arba excludes a 3-cornered garment. But I have another ribui for a 5-cornered garment. And now, of course, we're going to have to ask the question, if we've got 5 corners, are you going to have to put on 5 pairs of tzitzis? In any event, we have another Gemara in Zvachim, but I don't know if we have time for this. So I think we better quit while we're ahead, because the Gemara in Zvachim is going to exclude a 5-cornered garment, whereas the Gemara Menachos included a 5-cornered garment. And we'll see the way the Aruch HaShulchan explains this. So that's on page 44. So if you could make a note, because I'm definitely going to forget, that when we start next week, because I want to continue this, I really want to get a grasp on Tzitzis, if you don't mind, then please remind me that your page, my page 45, which is the next page, is your page 41. Did I get that right?
Correct.
Okay, so but you must remind me of that. And again, if there's, is there a how do you say in English, a taktiv, is there money allotted in the shul party for buying svarim?
Not specifically, but whatever. That's not the issue. Like,
What I'm
If you-
suggesting is, and I don't think it'll cost much money, is to order the entire set of Tzurba Mirabanan, and I'll tell you why. you're going to benefit from it. If it's on the shelves, people will take access to it. Here in my neck of the woods, almost every shul now has a group that learns Tzurba Mirabanan. It became a tremendous hit. Has it hit Canada yet? It did. You have it in Clinton Park?
At
No,
Or Chaim, they're doing it.
At Or Chaim. By the way, this is not a Zionist book. It doesn't matter the color of your yarmulke here. I mean, you'll see he's going to quote Chazon Ish left, right, and center. And one of the Rebbeim who teaches Tzurba Rabbanon in a place called Hagefen wears the whole garb, you know. I don't even have to describe it to you, you know. So I would say that if Clanton Park would order this, I don't know, you know, how long it would take to get it, we would benefit from it.
Bobby, you can talk to Michael Lax. He's been he was instrumental in translating Tzurba Rabbanon. He's got the whole set.
Right, but again, I'm insisting we get the Hebrew.
Yeah.
But you want to buy the English, that's okay. But
I'm just saying that he should have a connection to it.
Okay, then. I think they try, you know, if they know that the books are being used, I think they try to even reduce the price. I'm not sure. I don't know.
Berzon, just before we leave, if I can just throw in one thing, about the access to the Canadian account.
Oh, okay. So let me just shut this off.